This episode of Us and Them is supported with a grant from the Claude Worthington Benedum Foundation.
All right, here we go. Do your best. 1, 2, 3, 4.
When we first talked about starting this episode with an Ozzy Osbourne song, I thought it was nuts. I mean, this episode is about the controversial new charter school law in West Virginia, not about 1980s rock.
How fast are we going? Let's slow it down even some more. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2.
But my producer pointed out that these young musicians are from a band class in a Minnesota charter school. And Minnesota is crazy for charter schools. I mean, the state has 168 of them. And if you consider the lyrics to this song, Crazy Train, millions of people living as foes, maybe it's not too late to learn how to love and forget how to hate. Those lyrics are so us and them. And they speak to the decades-long charter school debate.
Do you guys want a song that we sound halfway decent on?
Who knew Ozzy Osbourne and Trey K would have anything in common?
Rock and roll.
I'm Trey K, and from West Virginia Public Broadcasting and PRX, you're listening to Us and Them, the show that tells the stories about the things that divide us. West Virginia is now the 43rd state to approve an education experiment that began 30 years ago in Minnesota. Parents in the Mountain State will soon be able to choose whether to send their children to a local public school or to a charter school. That's a public school, but with a twist. The twist is that teachers and administrators can try new things without having to get an okay from a big, potentially unwieldy school district bureaucracy. Rules vary by state, but states with charter schools have a few things in common. Charter schools are authorized or sponsored in a range of ways. Teachers have to be accredited, just like any regular public school. Standardized tests are required, and they must follow state and federal guidelines. To get a better understanding of how charter schools work, I asked my colleague, Todd Melby, to head up to Warba, Minnesota, a town of about 180 people, about 3 hours north of Minneapolis. Hey, Todd.
Hi, Trey.
Hey, Todd, tell me what Warba is like.
Warba is a tiny little town. It's not far from a bigger town called Grand Rapids, Minnesota, which, as you might know, is the birthplace of Frances Gumm. Or you probably don't know Frances Gumm. But anyway, the rest of the world knows her as Judy Garland.
Actually, I do know that Frances Gumm was Judy Garland.
Wow. Toto, I don't know about. Yeah, so anyway, Warba's tiny, but this charter school I visited gets its students from all over the area.
So what's the name of the charter school there in Warba?
Yeah, it's called Northern Lights Community School. It's a 6th grade through 12th grade school, and it's been around about 16 years. It was started by 2 former teachers. One of them still works there. Her name is Karen Howell, and she used to teach in Grand Rapids at an alternative school.
It was hard because the alternative program was grades 6 through 10. So in 10th grade, we had to send them back to what didn't work in the first place. It was hard to do. We felt that if teachers had more control over what was happening with the programming, with the curriculum, with the students and their families, that it would be more successful.
So Howell and her co-founder, another teacher, spent a couple of years making plans to start Northern Lights. They visited 20 charter schools around the state. They attended a 1-week workshop that taught folks how to start charters. Then they got a big 3-year grant so they could fix up a building, hire teachers, buy computers, all that kind of stuff.
Well, why Warba? And what about that building?
Well, Warba's not far from Grand Rapids. It's also relatively close to some other small towns. And the building that Northern Lights converted into a school is a 1-story brick affair. It's about 100 years old. It's sturdy. And once upon a time, it used to be a school, but just before they got their hands on it, It was owned by an ice fishing company.
What?
Yes, an ice fishing company.
That's so Minnesota.
People here in Minnesota like to fish all the time, summer and winter. And so this company had bought what used to be a schoolhouse and, was using the gym to make these ice fishing houses. Anyway, people into ice fishing buy these houses. Of course, they put them on the lakes, et cetera, et cetera. The company that used to own the school tore up the gym floors pretty good. So the folks that started the school had to fix up the gym floors and repair the rest of the school. Here's Karen Howell again.
Now we get to graduate them. We get to take them all the way to the finish line.
So unlike the alternative program at the public school that ended in the 10th grade, this charter is a 6 through 12 program, and it serves all kinds of students. Some have special needs, some might be called at risk, others just dig the school's focus.
Which is?
Students here learn by doing. It's called project-based learning. In addition to satisfying standard academic requirements, every senior has to complete a big project. So some past examples are building a Frisbee golf course and then working with the city on permissions, creating a garden, building a solarium, building a water tank under the garden. But throughout the school year, students also tackle smaller projects. I talked to one student about that.
Yeah.
Her name is Ari.
This school is the best, so.
Ari told me she likes energy drinks, but she's worried about what it's doing to her body. So she decided to create a project around it. The first step is to come up with a bunch of questions that she needs to answer.
Who owns the brand? How much sugar is in one can? What can a can do for ADHD? Like that type of stuff to help me understand what does the Monster Energy do to my body. And make sure if it's safe for me to drink at my age.
Ari's friend Lily has a couple of observations to share.
She's got issues. You can clearly tell.
You know this is being recorded.
Yeah, I know.
Okay, Todd, thanks for that. And that's really good stuff. But let's put a pin in that for right now and come back to Warba later on, because I want to hear what West Virginians have to say on this matter.
Hello, how are you?
Good.
This is Ann and Gwen.
Would you like me to take my shoes off?
Doesn't matter.
I'm at her house in Kearneysville, West Virginia, which is in the state's eastern panhandle. It's about an hour and 20-minute drive from Washington, D.C. As we're sitting here in this family room, I'm seeing a lot of evidence that there are children. So do you have kids?
Yes, there's my oldest over there. He's in 9th grade.
And Gwen's son was sitting behind us, watching from the kitchen. And Gwen and her husband are also parents to a 4th grader. Both are boys. They like those orange and purple pretend guns.
You can see lots of Nerf gun here, and we have a Nerf battle here almost daily.
And Gwen works as a cancer researcher. After growing up in Vietnam, she moved to the U.S. in 1981. This is her 30th year in America.
I'm here. I love it. I love our freedom and really appreciate everything I have here.
That said, she doesn't love everything about America. But after all, critiquing America is as American as apple pie and spring rolls. I asked her about America's public schools. Just how important is education in today's economy?
It is very important. Our economy is changing rapidly. Everything's focused on more computer central now. And, it's really important to keep our kids up to par with the rest of the world. I don't know if you know, in China, in high school, they teach kids like very high level of programming. And I don't see many kids here capable of doing that in that age, high school age.
So that's a concern that you have for your children? I mean, that what they have been taught in our public school system is substandard?
Absolutely. I myself educated in a different country, Vietnam, obviously. I went to high school there. And every single student there, after we graduate, we have to complete calculus 2 and physics and chemistry. And
My
so
next question for Nguyen was straightforward. What letter grade would you give the local public schools here in West Virginia's Eastern Panhandle?
It's really need improvement, especially in science and computer. They really lacking in those areas. I probably think it's a D.
The grade of a D, as in poor, as in nearly flunking. How Nguyen arrived at that letter grade is centered on how she believes the local public school failed her oldest son. She didn't want us to use his name because he was the target of bullying at school. But she gave us permission to interview him, and you'll hear his voice a little bit later. So, when he was in kindergarten, Nguyen's son didn't want to join in.
They would have circle time, and he would refuse to sit in a circle. He want to go sit in a corner by himself, and then play. He's not paying attention to what the teacher, the reading or whatever at the time.
Then he'd get punished.
They have a timeout corner, and they go into the corner, and the rest of the kids know that he's in trouble. So he's a bad kid.
Bad kid. That's how the school seemed to treat her child. Teachers urged Nguyen to get her son tested for attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or ADHD. And she did, and he was diagnosed with ADHD. But the medication doctors prescribed didn't help. And finally, one did, but it made him droopy, she said. Then things got worse.
Kids pick at him at school. He was bullied, and they don't do anything for him. Like, they say, okay, put him on a medication, but they never have like a special IEP program. They don't offer anything to accommodate him at all.
An IEP is an individualized education plan, though sometimes the P stands for program. The IEP is a roadmap outlining the assistance the school plans to offer a particular student. Nguyen says when her son was in the 4th grade, a psychiatrist suggested that she request an IEP for him. She believes the school should have done that much earlier. Then there were fights. Nguyen says there were a couple of boys who beat her son with sticks. And when her kid fought back, he was punished, not the other kids. When he reached middle school, the bullying got worse. Nguyen's son recalled one experience.
We did this thing where we were allowed to eat breakfast in class. So I was eating breakfast. I don't remember the conversation that led up to the comment, but this girl said that I'd be better off killing myself and that nobody would remember me or care. I got so angry, I remember throwing something at her, like a pencil, and punching a bookcase. But for whatever reason, I just lost it. I couldn't think.
He got bullied so much, and I believe the teacher just don't care whatsoever.
Throughout all this, Nguyen wasn't sure what to do. So she reached out to friends at church.
I'm an immigrant. I don't know the system. I don't know anybody. I just happened to go to church and talk about, the difficulty to one of the retired teacher that I know from church. And she said, go to Patricia Rucker, go to this person and that person. Let them hear your voice.
Patricia Rucker is a member of the West Virginia State Senate. On Sundays, Rucker and Nguyen attend the same church.
At first, I was very shy. I didn't think anybody would help me. But I'm like, well, I got nothing to lose, so.
So you go and you speak to Senator Rucker. How does she help?
She actually didn't promise anything. She said, well, yeah, I'm an ex-teacher too. You know what? This thing we can do. I have planned But, I don't have anything final yet.
So there you are at church. You've made the acquaintance of Senator Rutger. You're talking to her all the time.
I do my research. I say, look, Patricia, we funded them very well, but why are our teacher paid very low? And look at the executive people. Principal, vice principal, other executive, they get paid six figure, and these executive people sit in the office, get like their fat purse, nothing changed. While our teachers start at 30-some thousand a year. We need to fix the salary, and we also need school choice. We need competition, period.
School choice is a phrase many charter school advocates use to promote their cause. Ultimately, Ann and Gwen and her husband chose to take their son out of public school and enrolled him in a private Catholic school. I knew what I had to do next. I had to go to the state capitol in Charleston.
I am Patricia Rucker. I am a mom of 5, married to my husband for 25 years. I happen to currently serve in the West Virginia Senate, and I'm the Senate Education Chair.
Rucker, who is a Republican, is being a bit modest here. She doesn't just happen to serve in the West Virginia legislature. She chose to run in 2016 and won. And she ran again in 2020 and won again. Earlier this year, Rucker changed K-12 education in the state by leading the charge for charter schools and a voucher program called the Hope Scholarship. Rucker upended a century of tradition. What letter grade would you give the West Virginia State public schools?
So it's hard to think of one grade for an entire school system, but probably I would say a C.
A C?
Yes.
Say more.
Well, so
that sounds average.
In terms of effort and caring, I think we have a lot of staff, teachers, people in the education system who truly do care about the kids. Really, they wouldn't be here in West Virginia if they didn't truly care, because they could get paid more someplace else. So we have a lot of folks who are really invested for the right reasons and really do care. But in terms of how well we're doing, not just outcomes, because it's easy to just point to outcomes, right, where we're not doing very well.
According to U.S. News and World Report, West Virginia ranks 42nd among all states in K-12 public education. Do you have one particular concern about the education system? I mean, if there was one chief concern that you have?
I would say that the top concern is communication.
And what does that mean?
The one place I think where I would give an F, absolute F, is our ability to communicate with each other system-wide. Teachers with administrators, teachers with superintendents, superintendents with school board with state board with the legislature with everybody.
I have to confess that I'm a little confused by that answer.
Okay.
And here's why. As I've been doing my work as a journalist, and I don't always cover the West Virginia legislature, but I keep an eye on it. And during the past 2 legislative session years, there have been talks about reforming education, and that there have been people in the state who have championed reform that would include charter schools.
Yeah.
So when it seems as though that you are advocating for that type of reform, the main problem being communication, for some reason, it doesn't jive with like what it is that I usually hear about why people want charter schools.
So I'm not directly saying that charter schools comes because of that deficiency, but I believe that the communication issues that we have is part and parcel of why there is something disconnected. I could tell you that if you were to talk right now to the education leaders in this state, a lot of them would tell you we're not being heard. The charter school and the need for education reform and the need for school choice really is because some of those folks who are not being heard, the students that are not getting what they need out of the public education system need an option. They need somewhere to get what they need, and we're trying to increase those options for them.
Rucker says she attended public schools in Maryland and received a really good education. But she's worried for West Virginians who aren't getting that. She says parents of children with special needs might want a charter school because the public schools have let them down. Or parents might have a gifted or talented student, but their local public school offers only a single honors class. Some suspect Rucker wants charters for other reasons. I do know that you are a person of faith.
Absolutely.
And I think a lot of people say, well, she wants those charter schools because she wants to inject religion into schools.
That's not possible.
You're shaking your head.
Yeah,
no.
That's not even possible. If you look at the legislation we passed, it specifically says it can't be a religious school. But that is not what charter schools is about. Actually, we prohibit that in our charter school legislation. Charter schools is a public school. It is open to all. And the point of charter schools is that they can specialize and have a little bit more flexibility to innovate. It's not as rigid.
There's a lot of debate over whether charters can pick and choose students. Supporters say charter schools can't be selective. They say that, like any other public school, charters must enroll any child who wants to attend. But opponents say charters that specialize in, say, math and science siphon off high-performing students from the regular public schools, creating a separate and unequal system. The one thing that I know, growing up in West Virginia and really reporting on it intensely for, say, the past decade or 2 decades, is that the economy has been flagging in this state for at least 3 to 4 decades. When you were saying earlier that you're knocking door to door and you're saying my school system doesn't have this, it doesn't have that, well, probably the reason that it doesn't have it is because we don't have an economy that can sustain it.
Except
that
I represent Jefferson and Berkeley County. Jefferson and Berkeley County do not have the same issues that most of the rest of the state does. And not only are they increasing in population, which means that they're increasing in funding, increasing in tax revenue, but there has not been a school levy that hasn't passed in Jefferson and Berkeley County that I know of, ever. So,
are you cool with that?
Well, that's not the point. You can't make the same comparison in the people whose doors I was knocking in Jefferson and Berkeley County as you could if you were knocking in Webster County.
Or McDowell County, or Mingo County. Those are coal country counties that once thrived and are now hurting. The counties Rucker mentioned that she represents are in the Washington, D.C. excerpts and are home to more educated workers making more money. As I listened to Rucker advocate for charters, I wondered about something else. What we're seeing from charter schools across the nation is that they want to show that they're successful.
Yes.
And in showing that they're successful, they have a sorting process to make sure that we are going to bring students into this school who are going to succeed.
They can't do that.
What do you mean they can't do that?
They can't recruit students. It is open enrollment the same as public schools, all public schools. There is no I get to pick or I get to recruit. No, none of that. There is no picking and choosing. And in their application, if they're going to specialize, if it's a specialized charter school, because there are charter schools that are magnet schools, international baccalaureate programs, charter schools that are specifically for STEM. There's all sorts of specialty charter schools.
Sure.
In addition to that, there are specialty charter schools that are for children with exceptionalities, with special needs.
After a break, we'll hear from opponents of charter schools who filed a lawsuit to stop them, and a West Virginia mother with a special needs child.
Yeah, charter schools will not provide a world-class education for all, but it will for some.
You're listening to Us and Them. This program is supported in part by the West Virginia Humanities Council and the CRC Foundation. This episode is supported with a grant from the Claude Worthington Benedum Foundation.
In difficult times, music gives us peace, brings us together, and helps heal us. It calms our nerves and brightens our days. That's why we're bringing you classic episodes of Mountain Stage on air and in our podcast. This is Larry Gross, host of Mountain Stage. Find something that's familiar or brand new and feel the power of live music on our website, mountainstage.org.
Hey, Trey here. And you're listening to Us and Them from West Virginia Public Broadcasting and PRX. Sam Brunette teaches art at Morgantown High School in Monongalia County.
Well, I chose to be a teacher because the love of my craft. I'm an art teacher, and just the love of art.
He also serves as president of the American Federation of Teachers in Monongalia County. And he's not a fan of charter schools.
They say they want choice. There are already choices in West Virginia. There is already virtual choices. There are private schools in West Virginia that are already established.
In fact, he's one of the lead plaintiffs in a lawsuit challenging West Virginia's new charter school law. Sam Brunette and another teacher, Robert McLeod of Kanawha County, alleged the new charter school law is unconstitutional because it violates Article 12, Section 10 of the West Virginia Constitution, which prohibits the creation of independent school organizations absent the consent of county voters. Why did you choose to sue the state of West Virginia?
They've gone against their own constitution. Before, what we had was your elected officials in your local county had the ability to grant a charter or not.
Okay.
That wasn't moving fast enough for our current majority. And so the very next session, they cut out even our county elected officials or county boards and sent it to the state to control.
West Virginia legislators approved the charter school law after teachers and other school workers went on strike in 2018 and 2019. The first strike was over low pay and health insurance coverage. The second walkout focused on a wide-ranging education bill that included the controversial charter school proposal. Brunette fears the legislature could take more action.
I think next legislative session, we're going to be looking at probably some more retaliation upon what happened during those earlier two strikes. And that would be in the form of labor takebacks.
What is your concern about these new schools?
Well, my concern about these new schools primarily is that the public in which these new schools are going to be housed aren't given the right to vote on whether or not they want to have them in their community.
What if they're a great success?
What if they're a great success to the detriment of what is already a great success in Monongalia County? I could speak to some of the highest test scores in the state. I can speak to, all the advanced programs we have, AP. Plus, we just passed an excess levy with an 80% pass rate in our county, which proves that our public does support public education. So really what you're talking about is taking the rights of those people, and by those people, I mean the citizens of Monongalia County, to choose whether or not they want to have funding drained away from these already established successful schools and put into a school that basically doesn't even have a cornerstone laid yet.
In 2 miles, turn right onto Midway Avenue.
So I'm here in Hurricane, West Virginia, turning off into the little town that's just out of Hurricane called Culloden. That's where I'm heading. One of the best parts of making this show is getting a chance to talk with people all over the Mountain State. It's a rural town with little floral shops, hair salons,
Turn right onto Central Drive, then arrive at your destination.
fire station with 3 ports. So I'm Trey.
Hi, Trey. I'm Christy Black.
How come we're sitting outside of your home?
Well, we're sitting outside of our home because of COVID-19. Gracie has a lot of health issues. Gracie has Down syndrome, and Avery hasn't been vaccinated, and so in order to keep us all safe, we're outside.
Gracie and Avery are Christy's daughters. Gracie is 17 and in high school. Avery is 4 and starting school soon. Christy is married. Her husband is a stay-at-home dad. Do you know the name of my show? The name of my show is called Us and Them. And as I say the title of my show, I saw like a little smile on your face, which is you have a child with special needs. There's an us and them kind of right there. But I guess my question to you is, do you see there being kind of an us and them divide with charter schools, or do you fear that it might widen an us and them divide?
I do think that, as a parent of a child with a disability, unfortunately, there is a lot of times the us and them kind of perspective or feeling. And, it really comes more from administrators than it does the teachers. We've had good teachers that really just need the supports, and they have a hard time getting them from the district because, I think a lot of times it's all about money.
Educating students with special needs is often more expensive, but federal laws require that public school districts educate all students. Christy works for the West Virginia Developmental Disabilities Council as an advocacy specialist. She worries that the introduction of charter schools in West Virginia will mean having to fight for the rights of students like Gracie all over again.
I think that with charter schools, it's going to be even worse. Charter schools will still have the ability to kick out a kid with a disability for behaviors or for underperforming, because that's something big with charter schools. Because it's new, they have to show that performance. And so if a student isn't making that grade, and if they're not one of the brightest, then they're not going to want them there, or not very many of them there, to keep those numbers up.
But a charter school is a public school.
It is a public school. They also are able to raise their own funds, which makes it different, and they are able to also receive funds from the county. And that's one reason that I oppose charter schools is that you're splitting the funding. And the old school that's losing this enrollment is losing funds, and they still have the same bills to pay. They still have the same utilities. They still have to provide transportation. They still have all these different things that they have to provide.
When West Virginia lawmakers debated the charter school legislation, Christy and her daughter showed up at the state capitol in Charleston. Christy testified to legislators that charter school laws would funnel precious funding and resources away from her child's school. Gracie attends Cabell Midland High School in Ona. It's one of the largest public schools in the state. Some of the concerns Christy Black voices about charter schools are echoed by Diane Ravitch. She's a retired New York University professor and was a U.S. Assistant Secretary of Education during President George H.W. Bush's administration. Ravitch is one of the leading opponents of charter schools nationally.
Charter schools have a tendency to pick and choose their students. And if the parents are not willing to pitch in and make a commitment, if the students act up, if they have a record from public school that shows that they're trouble, they won't take them. So the result of this is you get students lured to a charter school by all kinds of grandiose promises. You'll be at the top academically and so forth, which they won't be, because the studies show that charters perform about the same as public schools. You're underfunding the public schools, in order to have a separate sector of charter schools, but it's not going to produce improvement.
As noted earlier, charter schools are public schools, so they can't choose which students sign up for classes. But according to the Congressional Research Service, a nonpartisan government agency, quote, charter schools often use lotteries to select new students if they have more applicants than available slots. Ravitch wrote a book about charter schools and vouchers. It's called Slaying Goliath: The Passionate Resistance to Privatization and the Fight to Save America's Public Schools. She's opposed to charters for a lot of reasons, including the notion that competition from charter schools will improve public schools.
But you have to ask yourself, in what way do we want to have competition? If you don't like your police department, should we hire a second police department? Should we give people the script to go out and hire private security guards? No, if you have a public service, it should serve all people. Its doors should be open to all, and we should focus on making it better, because that's a much simpler task than setting up competing systems, neither of which will be well funded, and one of which, the charters, are going to cannibalize the public schools by taking the students they want and by having freedom and flexibility that public schools don't have. Now, if the legislature wanted to make their schools better, they should look at the freedom and flexibility that charters will have and give that same flexibility to the public schools.
In your book, Slaying Goliath, you kind of talk about how charter schools can come into an area, compete against the traditional schools or the public school system that has been there for generations. And that in many ways, that effect can be somewhat like Walmartization.
Yeah, well, I call it Walmartization because you think about it, your kids went to the same public school that you went to, and then a shiny new charter school opens up and says, we're going to offer you doodads and all kinds of premiums, and they'll promise their child will go to college. And these are not promises they can keep unless they simply take the best students, which is what the only high-scoring charters are the ones that take the best students. Charters have not performed any miracle. And that's why I say that if the people in West Virginia who think that competition is going to lead to an improvement in public schools, they should think again. It'll mean less money for public schools, and you can't get better by having less.
As you say that, I'm sitting here in the capital city of Charleston, and I remember when I grew up here, Capitol Street was where most of the clothing stores were, et cetera. By the time I graduated from high school and entered college, they had built a big shopping mall in the middle of the town. Subsequently, they've made another shopping mall outside of town. Now that place is desolate, and all of the anchor stores have left. I'm wondering, is that what you think might happen to the school system?
Yeah, I think it's exactly right. I mentioned Walmart for a good reason. The Walton family, which owns Walmart, is the single biggest funder of charter schools, and they spread millions and millions of dollars every year. The only bigger funder of charter schools is the federal government, which gives out about $440 million a year to create new charter schools. So in effect, we are creating competition for something that we should be fixing and improving, not taking away customers.
Over the past few decades, both Republican and Democratic presidential administrations have supported charter schools. That includes George H.W. Bush, Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, Barack Obama, and Donald Trump. Several big cities are home to charters: Los Angeles, Chicago, New York, New Orleans. Ravitch doesn't believe charters work anywhere, and definitely not in small towns.
The charter model doesn't work in a rural area because when your population is either steady state or declining, you're going to basically destroy the public school with competition because they need to hold on to every student they can to get the money they need to educate them. So it's not a very attractive situation for a charter operator. A charter operator is going to look at rural West Virginia and say, I don't want to go there. I'm going to go to where there's a density of population. So my prediction would be that the charter operators would avoid the rural parts of the state and go to the cities, and that whoever's promoting this will be very disappointed.
We're still, from Ravitch's point of view, are online charter schools.
The most corrupt sector in the charter world is the online charter world. I mean, I could make the hair on your head curl more to listen to these stories. There was just a settlement in California of an online charter school called A3, and the owners of it, who were not educators, paid the state back hundreds of millions of dollars that they siphoned off with false registrations.
A3 is the online charter school company Ravitch mentioned. Earlier this year, its founders, Jason Schrock and Sean McManus, pled guilty to conspiracy to commit theft of public funds. That's a felony. They stole more than $200 million from California's public school system.
The online charter business is the most profitable in the country, and you will have national online chains coming into West Virginia and sucking the money right out of your state.
On the other side of the charter school debate nationally is a man named Joe Nathan. Nathan and Ravitch don't get along.
I think she's wrong, and I think that she misses a lot.
Back in the 1970s, Nathan helped launch an alternative school in St. Paul, Minnesota. That institution, the St. Paul Open School, is celebrating its 50th anniversary this year. St. Paul Open was created inside the St. Paul public school system, but its relative independence and success led Nathan to think about new ways of reaching at-risk students, and that includes charters.
I don't think there's any best school for all kids. And by the way, I don't think that we ought to be thinking that all district schools are better, all charter schools are better. Better is better using multiple measures. But I'm not a fan of saying either district schools are better or chartered public schools are better. I think that's a ridiculous argument that has wasted literally millions and millions of dollars. Better is better.
That said, Nathan believes charter schools make public education, well, better. In part because charters challenge educational norms. Instead of looking at reading or math skills a child is lacking, Nathan would rather flip that expectation on its head.
Yes, we ought to help youngsters understand what their reading, writing, and math skills are, unquestionably. But we also ought to say to youngster, what do you really care about? Is it dinosaurs? Is it painting? Is it dance? Is it becoming an attorney?
And Nathan says that is a conversation to have with the student in August, before the school year starts. The key is asking questions and then listening.
What is it that really excites you and interests you? And we will help you learn more about all of those things. In addition to, and as a part of helping you learn to do reading, writing, math, and other critical skills. So we want schools to help every youngster develop their own individual gifts, talents, and interests. That's what every school ought to do, regardless of its philosophy.
In his home state, Nathan pushed to make charter schools a reality. In Minnesota, that happened in 1991. Today, about 7% of Minnesota kids study at charters. That's among the highest percentage in the nation, but it's not the highest. In 8 states, including California, Michigan, Colorado, and North Carolina, at least 1 in 10 kids attends charter schools. Not just anyone can start a charter school. Charters need to be approved by an authorizer with educational expertise. Sometimes that's a public school district. During his career, Nathan has read lots of charter school proposals. Some bad, some good.
Just having a good idea is not enough. You've got to find a building. You have to have a coherent philosophy. Some of the charter proposals that I've reviewed over the last 20 years are terrible proposals. Sometimes people have good ideas, but they don't have the staff people who are qualified to carry them out. So it isn't just enough to have a good idea. You have to have the skill and the talent to carry it out.
Once approved, charter schools should be monitored, just like public schools. or what Nathan calls district public schools.
Sometimes there's corruption in both district and chartered public schools, so there needs to be a careful monitoring. Board meetings need to be open. The financial records of the school should be available, just as district public school records are supposed to be available to the public.
Finances can trip up charter schools. Earlier this year, a Minnesota charter school invested $5 million in a hedge fund. The school, the Mung College Prep Academy, lost most of that money, $4.3 million, when markets stumbled. Under Minnesota law, schools are prohibited from making such investments, but school officials did it anyway. I asked Joe Nathan whether it was more difficult to start a charter school compared to a regular public school.
I don't think it's more difficult or less difficult. I think starting a new school is a challenge, as it should be. It shouldn't be easy to create a public school, whether it's district or charter, that's going to work with kids. You need to have people who are competent to carry it out. You need to have some people who are competent to carry out the business side of schools, because we're talking about millions of dollars of public funds. You need to have people who are competent. You need to have transparency.
Listening to Joe Nathan talk about transparency in charter schools and the importance of discovering a student's passion for learning reminds me of the folks at Northern Lights Community School.
We're going to double check. 6 squared, 36.
It's the charter school where we started our story. It's in Warba, Minnesota.
Ah, okay. So we're going to go left to right here. Mm-hmm. So you know how you have 2 divisions? Mm-hmm. So we're going to start here and then go that way.
This is Josie Pitts Loby. She's a special education teacher at Northern Lights. She's working on a math problem with a student.
I think 9, probably. 4 times 10 is 40, right?
Yeah.
What's 40 minus 4?
My producer, Todd Melby, recorded this audio. Let's bring him back in to tell us a little more about Northern Lights and this teacher in particular. Hey, Todd, why did you want me to hear this particular piece of tape?
This teacher is a great example of one of the things that a charter school requires. Oftentimes, staff members like Josie Pitts Loby need to wear a lot of hats to make something like Northern Lights Community School work.
Yeah, I'm the special ed coordinator. I also teach. Yeah, I do a lot of things.
Josie Pitts Loby is a teacher, a special ed coordinator, is treasurer of the school board, and she's chair of the school board.
Yeah, I'm a dork.
Wait, what?
Yeah, the board of this charter school is teacher-led.
Teacher-led.
So when charter schools first opened in Minnesota, the statute said that it had to be a teacher majority board. We have kept that. So we have 4 staff members, we have 2 community members, and we have a parent. So
so 7 board members in Warburg, 4 are teachers.
Okay.
And she's not the only one who does multiple jobs. The custodian here is a guy named Vern. He also drives one of the school buses.
Wow.
Yeah, as you probably heard, there's a nationwide bus driver shortage. So Vern does double duty because some students come from far away.
Yeah, transportation is hard because I've got kids getting on the bus so early. One of my kids last year, or the year before, last year doesn't count, 6:08 in the morning. And we started school at 8:45. Yeah. This was his place, so he did what they needed to do to get here. So
At the moment, Northern Lights has almost 100 students. But even in this rural setting, Pitts Loby argues they're not a threat to local school districts.
So I've had people say, "Oh, I can't believe you work for a charter school. They take money from the home district." And it's like, no, that's not exactly how that works. They have this for-profit idea in their head, like, oh, they're just pocketing money, and it's like, no, we follow the same rules. We get the same, not same funding, but similar funding.
That's That's really interesting, Todd. I really appreciate you taking the time to go and find this story in Warba. Thanks a lot.
You're welcome. Thanks, Trey.
In West Virginia, officials are moving ahead with plans for charter schools. Governor Jim Justice appointed 5 people to the West Virginia Professional Charter School Board. That board is comprised of a former basketball coach at a Christian school, a real estate developer, a college vice president, a public relations executive with ties to the Libertarian Cardinal Institute, and a senior fellow at the Cardinal Institute. The Professional Charter School Board will serve as the newest charter school authorizer in the state. Previous legislation allowed county school districts to authorize charter schools, but no would-be charter won authorization. According to the lawsuit challenging the legality of charter schools, 3 of the first 7 applicants are for online charters, and 2 of those are operated by publicly traded companies. Also applying for charters are the Shepherd Aviation Academy, a 9th to 12th grade school in Jefferson and Berkeley counties, and the West Virginia Academy, a K-12 school in Cheat Lake near Morgantown. You've been listening to Us and Them. Our team for this episode is me, Trey Kay, Todd Melby, Mitch Hanley, and Kate Smith. Special thanks to Linnell Hancock, head of the Spencer Fellowship for Education Reporting at the Columbia University School of Journalism, and to Sarah Carr from the Hechinger Institute. Michael Lipton and Tristan Lozow wrote and performed the Us and Them show music. Mark Lerner designed our logo. Lelena Price helps us with images for the web. The marvelous people from West Virginia Public Broadcasting and PRX make Us and Them possible. So do grants from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, the West Virginia Humanities Council, and the CRC Foundation. This episode is supported with a grant from the Claude Worthington Benedum Foundation. Us and Them was originally developed with assistance from the mentorship program at AIR, the Association of Independents in Radio. We'll see you next time on Us and Them.
Support for this podcast comes from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.